I'm going to do something I don't normally do on this show, and that is I'm going to give Rob Manfred a break.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm yours, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully, and thanks so much for following Locked On MLB, which is part of the Locked On Network, which is now the #1 sports podcasting network. Thank you. That's due to your support here. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever it's called these days. And I'm being a lot more active on Twitter, or whatever it's called these days. And I'm also, if you're going to be joining the Everydayer Club, I am now being pretty active on the Discord channel, talking to you all and giving your thoughts and everything like that. And so, it took a little bit, but we got it up and running, and there you go. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. The wild card round is over, but we got the next round coming up, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. And also, let's do the trivia question. I'm going to be just full disclosure. Over the course of this show, I will be checking MLB trade rumors. The second greatest website in the history of planet Earth, only behind baseballreference.com. No big announcements to be made right now. Alex Bregman is still the only ice broken in this impasse that we've been having here. So let's get back to this. I have some thoughts on other things going on here. The trivia question I had for the other show, which was Manny Ramirez hit his final career home run as a member of what team? A couple of you got this right. John Italia, Z8J, said Manny's last homered as a member of the Chicago White Sox. Now, that's true. However, Ryan Main, I6R, threw in a little caveat. Technically, Manny's last homer was on the Iowa Cubs because he had a failed comeback with the Cubs that fell short. So I should say final major league home run, and that's what it was. I have a little itch in my nose. I'm not even going to edit that out. What happens a lot of times when Major League Baseball news is at such an absolute crawl as it is for the last couple of months, Alex Bregman finally said, F it, please sign me. And he was signed by the Chicago Cubs. And we're still waiting for a bunch of other people to sign. And so sometimes people who are starving for news that isn't NFL playoffs, that isn't the NBA, that isn't National Hockey League, that isn't the Golden Globes, or God knows what's happening out in the world that's not in sports. There's a real clamoring for something to talk about. And a lot of people started going absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, not a sponsor of the show, for an interview that Commissioner Rob Manfred did on WFAN. WFAN, if you don't know, is the sports talk radio show or station in New York. Has been since 1990, 89 or 90. When I first moved to New York in 1990, the WFAN was just this behemoth. And while sports talk radio doesn't have the power it used to have, it's still pretty powerful. And you will note that Rob Manfred didn't come on our show to talk about the state of baseball. They went on WFAN. And in the interview, Rob Manfred talked about a lot of stuff. He talked about stuff going on about the potential work stoppage that's coming around. And he was, and he obviously doesn't want to, be Chicken Little and start screaming, oh my God, it's a disaster. He's being realistic. But he has made the point in some of the work the labor negotiations that they've had, every single labor negotiation they've had since the infamous strike of 1994 and lockout of 1995, we've had a full season every year with the exception of COVID. 2020, obviously COVID happened, and that's bonkers. But there was labor strife in 2002. There was labor strife certainly in 2022, where there was a lockout, but they did manage to play 162 games. And I am hoping that his optimism is going to be rewarded. I've said many times, this is insane when the popularity of baseball is on the rise, especially with the international markets, and one of the best rated World Series and best World Series we've seen in a generation take place. They should be building on that instead of pulling the ripcord. But he did say a couple of things. He did bring up a bunch of things that made a lot of people online, reenact the ending of the 1931 film Frankenstein with the pitchforks and torches that they were going to go capture the monster. Talking about the possibility of an in-season tournament, shortening the season, but the in-season tournament and a deadline for free agent signings all came up. And you would have thought, if you had read the responses to it, that not only was it mentioned, that he had already settled it, he had already put it down, he had already said this is what's going to happen and everything like that. What was suggested was a split season where the middle of the year you have a first half, second half champion, and that becomes part of who goes to the postseason. You see some of that in the minor leagues. Some minor leagues pull that off. Also, there's a mid-season tournament. The NBA has something called the NBA Cup. Now, I used to follow the NBA very, very closely growing up in Massachusetts during the age of Bird and Magic, and then living in New York during the age of Patrick Ewing and all them, and the Knicks, and it was where Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, David Robinson, all those great stars of the 1990s. I follow basketball pretty closely. I don't follow it as closely anymore. I'm a little more of just showing up for the playoffs and hoping the Celtics do okay. And there is something called the NBA Cup, which is a mid-season tournament, which I suppose they give you a banner for. Now, you could offer me what the Cubs just signed Alex Bregman for, and said that money is yours if you can tell me who won the NBA Cup. Your money's safe. I have no idea. And I also tell you, I'm as big a baseball fan as you are ever going to meet. I couldn't possibly care less about a mid-season tournament of baseball. So all these things happen in this interview. And some people were on Twitter or whatever it's called now and asking me, are you going to say anything about this? Are you going to say anything about that? I know you're someone who's not a big Manfred fan. I'm not a big man. I am not blinded by the light. I'm not a Manfred man. And if you got that joke, really, really bless you. But I have to say, I did something that I think not a lot of people who complained about him did. And that is, I actually watched the interview. And after I watched the interview, I'm going to tell you something. I have a much different take on the Manfred interview than I think some people are expecting me to have. Hey, are you a huge football fan? I'm not. But I do really enjoy watching these playoff games. These playoff games have been fantastic. In fact, you would have thought I grew up in Buffalo when I was watching that Bills game over the weekend. Well, the wild card round has come and it has gone, but we have the next round. What is that called? Is it the divisional round? I'm not 100% sure, but do you know what it is? It's playoff mode, and FanDuel is in playoff mode. Every game day during the National Football League playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get into the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel uses a profit boost pack that's waiting for you inside the app. Now, you can each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open up your profit boost pack, and that's written down for me first thing on game day, and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice. Do we want to bring up juice in a NFL playoff involving Buffalo? On the bets you already like to make instead of forcing you to bet something new. You are not going to bet against your will. Every play feels bigger. And the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, say that 3 times fast, and then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. And I also want to make this abundantly clear to everyone that this is the time that you need to think about joining the Everydayers Club. Go check it out. And somebody, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen and making it the #1 sports podcast. But on the Everydayer Club, you get ad-free audio of Locked On MLB. It's similar to Apple Podcast or Spotify. And right now, you can join the Everydayer Club Discord, and I'm on there a bunch. You can interact with me and other hosts and talk about things going on in the off season and during the season. Yikes, I'm going to be including a whole lot. So what you got to do is you got to check us out. Where's that lower third? Right here. Here's what you got to do. You got to go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. If you want to check us out specifically, go to lockedonmlb.supercast.com. Here's the deal. I watched the interview with Rob Manfred, and he brought up the idea of realignment. He brought up the idea of a midseason tournament. He brought up the idea of split season. He brought up the idea of shortening the season. He showed up the idea of expansion. All these things he brought up, but he didn't bring them up in a way as if he said they're on their way. They're on their way. He brought them up in a way that said, hey, these are things we're talking about. These are things we're considering. And even though I don't like everything Rob Manfred has done, guess what? That's part of the commissioner's job, is to at least talk about stuff, to at least consider stuff, to at least take a look at stuff and say, hey, maybe this will work, maybe that won't work. Yes, Manfred has done a couple of things as commissioner that I really, really dislike. The Manfred man is the biggest one of all, the runner on second base that they do at extra innings. I think that stinks. I absolutely think it stinks. I also hate the universal DH. I love that both leagues have a different set of rules. When the American League comes to the National League and vice versa, it means that interleague play means something, that there's a difference to the game. You don't have that in an AFC team plays an NFC team in football, or an East and West Conference teams play in hockey or basketball. That means nothing. But the American League National League game did mean something. You have the national team gets to have a DH, or you're going to have to figure out who. I just hit my microphone. I'm sorry. I'm itching my nose. I'm sorry. I have a little bit of allergy. We're all going to have to deal with it. And that, I liked the quandary of the pitchers batting. And I like those are two different styles of baseball. And I like the fact that, wow, this pitcher's pitching really well, but it's a 6 innings, a 3-2 game. I like thinking who's on the bench. Or the 7th or 8th batters coming up. The big hitters are coming up first, second, and third. What are you going to do when the pitcher spot come up? I miss that. But I also do like the DH. I can like more than one thing. That's true. You could do that. You can like a comedy and a drama. You can like an action film and a old classic French film. You can like more than one thing. I like lasagna and sushi. I don't like them together. But the Universe of the Age is something I really didn't care for. But the point is this. Sometimes you have to throw spaghetti at the wall. Sometimes you have to say, let's consider things. Sometimes you can't be precious about the tradition, and sometimes you have to be precious about the tradition. And part of the things a commissioner is going to have to do is start weighing the pros and cons of these things. He was throwing them out as trial balloons. Anyone out there trying to act like he was endorsing a split season or calling for a midseason tournament, he was saying these are things we're talking about. Good. Talk about them. And if something could work, great. And if something doesn't work, great. And if you want to try something, maybe try it. And some things may not always work, but sometimes they do. If I was doing the Locked On podcast show back on in 1995, first of all, where are you listening to it in 1995? But secondly, I was adamant against the wild card. I was completely against it. I was of the traditional, you need to finish in first place. I don't want to have a second place team in the World Series, blah, 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 blah. Even though we had seen some teams like the 1973 Mets, like the 1985 Royals, and like the 1987 Minnesota Twins, who were clearly inferior teams to other teams in the league making it to the World Series. And there were teams, each one of those years, there were teams that were on the outside looking in of the playoffs, watching an inferior team win the World Series. But I was all precious about that. And do you know what? I turned out to be wrong. Now, it turns out that I'm actually not the biggest fan of the current format. I do think the best format they came up with was having the 3 division winners and the 2 wildcard teams playing a one-game playoff. And that would burn one of their starting pitchers. Yes, there are instances where it would blow up in your face, like the year where the 3 best teams in baseball were all in the NL Central, and the year when the Dodgers and Giants had the best records, and one of them was going to get eliminated, but fine. But you sometimes have to throw ideas out there. Some ideas that have happened under Rob Manfred's watch have turned out to be really, I think, pretty good. I think the pitch clock has worked great. I mean, would I have been for that in 1995? Probably not. Probably not, but seeing it in practice, I think it's really good. Get in the box. Let's get going here. I also like the rules about throwing over to first. Do you know why? I love stolen bases. I love stolen bases. Could be that I grew up in the 80s, and the 80s it was absolutely running wild on the bases, but that's fun. I don't like station-to-station baseball. I like going first to third. I like looking over and saying, he's going. I love that. And there are more stolen bases, and I think that's better. I think that's improved the game. There's a lot of things to criticize Rob Manfred about. Beyond some of the rule changes that I don't like, also the fact that, sometimes he seems to be making decisions based upon wanting baseball to look more like the NBA. Baseball's not the NBA. Baseball's baseball. And appeal to the fans first. I don't like all the blackout stuff and having things on all over creation online trying to find the damn game. I'm paying for the MLB app. I want all my games on there. And I actually think baseball is going to eventually be forced into doing the right thing, putting all the things in one spot when you start seeing all these regional networks starting to collapse and the way that you consume baseball be on the apps. But I digress. There's a lot of reasons to not like Rob Manfred, but we shouldn't have to make up reasons. You should be as objective as possible. Hell, he's not John Fisher. This is a guy who's done a few things right. And by the way, his handling of the A's and allowing them to be in a situation where they're going to be spending multiple years on a minor league ballpark while we're still waiting for a stadium to be built in the middle of the desert That's not one of his brightest moments either. That happened on his watch. And by the way, did you notice that it was going to be 3 years in Sacramento, and then suddenly it became 4 years in Sacramento, an entire presidential term in Sacramento? That happened on Manfred's watch, and he probably should have forced the A's to sell, much like the Dodgers were forced to sell in the early 2010s. There's a lot of reasons to criticize Rob Manfred, but do you know what? Don't make up reasons. Part of his job is to take a look at all these things. I don't know what I would have thought of a Field of Dreams game, but do you want it to turn out to be a great thing? And sometimes I criticize stuff like starting the season overseas, which I still think the regular season should start here and in one spot. But it's for the marketing of the team and the marketing of the leagues. You can't do better than they've done when they've opened in Asia the last few years. That's just the case. And some of his talks on realignment, I actually align with. Since the universal DH has made the American League and National League the same thing, then what are we doing? Let's realign. And he made the great point in the interview. Yeah, he made some great points that if you have a playoff game that's between, let's say, between Los Angeles and New York, and in like the first round, and all of a sudden that's either going to be a too early game for California or too late game for New York. If you have more things be regional, then you're going to see more matchups that are in prime time, which is good for the sport, good for the exposure of the sport. You don't want Mets fans staying up till 10 o'clock at night to try to watch their game. That's ridiculous. Look, is doing, believe it or not, what he's supposed to do to a degree. I don't always like what he's done, but let's be objective about things. Let's not go crazy because we're firing some ideas around. You spitball ideas. And that's what he's doing. And his time as commissioner is going to come to an end pretty soon. And you know what that means? That means you have to vote for Sully, baseball commissioner, for a change. That's right. Once he steps down, it's my turn. First things first, we're getting rid of that runner on second base. Second things second, we're going to force John Fisher to sell. All right? And after that, well, I'm going to take a good long look at some of the stuff he's done, and who knows? Maybe he had a couple of decent ideas. Hey, let's just go through a couple of more viewer questions. Before we do that, I'm going to head over to MLB trade rumors. Let's see. Did anything happen? Yankee and Cody Bellinger are at an impasse. See, that's news. Is that someone who isn't signed is still unsigned. Let me go through a couple of things that people say. I was talking the other day when I was doing the show that was on New Year's Eve, where I was talking about the Dodgers, and I had on, we did the crossover with Locked On Dodgers, which is a tradition to have the host of the World Series champion on. The first section, I was talking about the World Series and how close the Dodgers came to losing that over and over and over again. And then after that, I said that the popularity of the Dodgers, and specifically Ohtani, they're not ruining baseball. They could very well be saving the game. Well, the Enigma 2004 says, you love to talk about all the ways that LA could have lost the postseason. What exactly is your point there? We didn't lose. So why repeatedly bring up the ways we could have lost? Okay. I'm not sure if that was a serious comment, but I'll respond to it as if it was serious. The reason why I was talking about all the ways they could have lost was showing how dramatic the postseason was and how much of a Houdini act the LA Dodgers did on the rounds against Philadelphia, and especially in the World Series. And that's what made it incredibly dramatic. If it was just a bludgeoning where they just pounded their opposition to a pulp, that would not have been as interesting. And also, I brought up the fact that it was such a wonderful World Series, and the fact that they had to avoid bullets, kind of like in the Matrix. Then that's one of the things that made it thrilling. Um, I thought that was kind of easy to understand. And I guess he's one of these people who think I'm a Dodger hater. I'm not. I'm not a Dodger fan, but I live here in LA County, and quite frankly, it's more interesting for me as a baseball fan when the Dodgers are doing well, because I could talk to more people about the Dodgers. And I was thrilled when they beat the Yankees. I've been at the Dodger Stadium the last 2 times they clinched the pennant, in 24 against the Mets, and I was at the Shohei Ohtani game where he pitched those shutout innings and hit 3 homers. And I think they're saving the game, quite frankly. But, you can't please everybody. Another person I can't please is Carlos Hernandez, -C3R. We're still talking about Tucker. Give it up. He was never re-signed with the Cubs. They don't want him back. I think, Carlos, you have an interesting point there, unlike the Enigma 2004. It's interesting that Tucker is supposedly the most sought-after free agent in the league. And he had, he lost a little bit of time to injury last year, but he put up some very, very good numbers last year with the Chicago Cubs. But I find it really interesting that the Cubs basically were like, oh, no, don't go, pulling a Willy Wonka situation there. And this is a guy who's a 4-time All-Star, Gold Glove winner, Silver Slugger, won a World Series title for his troubles with the Astros, actually caught the final out. Consistently steals a lot of bases, consistently hits a lot of home runs, but maybe, just maybe, the Cubs were not positive that he was that big leader type. The fact that they had him for a full year and clearly have the money to be, making moves, as they just did with Bregman, and they don't have a whole hell of a lot of huge contracts on the book in terms of the long term, and Tucker is still in his 20s and as an all-star and supposedly the best, and the Cubs are like, yeah, we're going to move on. That's a little bit of a red flag for me. It may be, just maybe, Tucker isn't the man. He's going to be paid like he's the man, but maybe he's not the man, which makes me think he would be perfect on the Toronto Blue Jays, the team that the Dodgers almost lost to. Because he doesn't have to be the man on that team. They have the man. He's the son of a Hall of Famer, and it's his team. So Tucker would complement them. He would not have that problem if he was in Los Angeles, because he would be the 4th biggest player on that team, if that. So it is interesting. If he was never, it maybe isn't that he was never re-signing with the Cubs, but more to your second point, they don't want him back. Yeah, he's been there for a year, and not that he was bad, and not that anyone has any bad things to say about him, but I think it's very interesting that the Cubs weren't exactly falling over themselves to get him. I mentioned Matt Shaw could be a possible trade chip. I know Nico Horner's name is going around like crazy. I'd keep Nico Horner. Why not? You have a chance to win the World Series. Ken Mitchell, hi, H51, says Nationals have a bunch of young outfielders that need a third baseman. There you go. Let's Reese's Peanut Butter Cup this and make this a trade. Speaking of trades, I'm going to go over to MLB trade rumors one more time. No news, so I'm going to wrap up this show. Man, this is just give him a break. Give Manfred a break. Just because you don't agree with everything he said, don't turn little things he says into something that they're not. By the way, thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On MLB. Hopefully we'll have announcements of Tucker and Bellinger and all the other free agents who are still unsigned for Amber Valdez. And make sure you subscribe and follow to Locked On MLB, and you can get all your latest episodes. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, whatever it's called these days. I'm on there a lot more recently these days, and also a lot on my own personal Instagram account, which is Sully Baseball Podcast. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. You get Locked On MLB at at the and get that for no ads. I speak English. You can get ad free and plus access to the Discord where I get to interact with some of you. Go check us out at lockedonmlb.supercast.com. I'm sorry, something popped up on my screen as I was recording this, and I jumped. Let's go to the trivia question, shall we? It is Kevin Mitchell's birthday today, and Kevin Mitchell won the National League MVP in 1989 for the San Francisco Giants. Back there, we did not know what wins above replacement was. And so here's the trivia question. What Atlanta Braves outfielder led the National League in WAR in 1989? The Braves were no good in 1989, but they had an outfielder who led the league in WAR in 1989. Who was the Braves outfielder who did that? Put your answers down below. And talking about Rob Manfred, who I don't always agree with, but you know what? Let's not make up reasons to be mad at him and realize that part of his job is throwing spaghetti at the wall. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.